From Hamilton Place Strategies in Washington, D.C., this is the HPS Insights Podcast.
Welcome to HPS Insights, a podcast from Hamilton Place Strategies, analyzing the current events impacting the business and political communities. I'm your host, Michael Steele, and I'm a partner here at HPS, and today I'm joined by Declan Garvey, a reporter for the Dispatch and an HPS alum. I want to start by discussing last night's State of the Union address from President Trump.
Definitely. It was quite a speech. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's one of those things that's been getting pretty strong remarks from Republicans. Obviously, there's some drama with Nancy Pelosi that I'm sure we'll touch on. But it's Trump is having a pretty good moment right now, coming off of signing 2 trade deals and the kind of, at least in the early stages, victories in Iran and against ISIS. And so we're kind of, I believe Gallup put out a poll showing his approval rating at all-time highs for him at 49%. So he's kind of having a moment right now, and we'll see, it's Trump. Things don't necessarily last, and you can't predict out further than a few days, let alone months, before 2020. But
yeah, I was going to say, I thought that the speech was the strongest in a lot of ways that I've seen him give. It was kind of, I think of it like the smart Hulk or the bro Hulk from Avengers Endgame, right? Like your traditional Trump is Hulk, powerful but kind of uncontrolled. Bruce Banner is your typical politician reading off a teleprompter. What we saw last night was smart Hulk, where he was Trumpian and hitting all the right notes, hitting all the notes that his base wanted to hear, but also under control, going off the teleprompter, doing it in an effective and relatively unvindictive fashion.
Right. And I think one of the biggest points is that he did not bring up impeachment, and that was something that I'm sure in his heart of hearts would have loved to, but a lot of his advisors also kind of boxed him in earlier in the day. I think I saw Hogan Gidley went on Fox and said, I've seen the speech, the word impeachment is not in it.
Although traditional, hulky Trump tends to like to shatter those boxes that his staff tries to put him in. So yes. I thought, look, I mean, the speech he gave last night, if he can give a variation on that speech from now until Election Day, that's a pretty powerful argument when you combine the economic record, the successes in the wars overseas, and then he just kept banging on some of these culture war issues that, you can agree or disagree, you can fact check, you can argue that he's demagoguing, but he's generally on the right side politically on a lot of these things.
Right. And you talk about, I think one of the key points that we wrote about this morning in the Morning Dispatch, subscribe at thedispatch.com, is he's staked out a very strong position on Medicare for All, and particularly Medicare for All being extended to undocumented immigrants.
Yeah.
And that is something that, he, as you said, popular opinion, he is on the right side of that issue. But again, something that almost every Democratic presidential candidate raised their hand on the debate stage when they said that they were in favor of it. So,
and it's a classic political tactic, right? I mean, this is a potential area of weakness for the president. The repeal and replace effort on Obamacare failed. He doesn't really have a substantial new overhaul of our healthcare system to offer. And so he goes on offense. He attacks the Democratic alternative. Right. He talks about Medicare for All as a socialist system, and that's his strength and his where he clearly feels the most comfortable. Were there any dangerous signals you heard in the speech? Anything that concerns you, aside for perhaps from the lack of strict adherence to the facts?
That I was just about to, as you bring up healthcare, he mentioned that his administration is doing everything that it can to protect people with pre-existing conditions. That's not entirely accurate. He's currently supporting a lawsuit that would throw out the ACA entirely. Something that stood out to me in the speech was and it kind of, we've seen this materialize over the past few weeks, is I think somebody in the White House has convinced Trump that he can do much better with the African American vote in 2020, and that's something that you saw a lot of attention drawn to in the speech. Obviously, he had that $10 million ad buy in the Super Bowl that highlighted his efforts on criminal justice reform and how that has affected the African American community.
Well, and 100-year-old Tuskegee Airman last
Exactly.
night. And one of the most, just inspiring parts of, he used the Lenny Skutniks, the State of the Union tradition going back to President Reagan of bringing people to illustrate policy points. He used that to tremendous effect, I thought. And even when he didn't necessarily have a particular policy to talk about, like the young girl who was born after 21 weeks, he reminds his supporters that he's a protector of unborn human life.
Right. And, you had the fourth grader from Philadelphia who he granted a waiver to, choose whatever school that she wants to attend. Some of those are Rush Limbaugh. That's kind of a culture war play. But, that is what Trump is doing, and that's what his base wants, too.
Well, and I think that the State of the Union timing, as you wrote about this morning, the president's on a bit of a roll. Today we will have the acquittal or the failure to convict and remove him from office, the end of the impeachment process, at least for now. Don't think that vote's in any doubt today, which we kind of knew was coming. But it was also presaged by the absolute debacle of the Democratic caucus in Iowa, which the president obviously had nothing to do with, but it certainly made the Democratic Party look like the gang that can't shoot straight. Right.
And you see that there are points coming out of Trump world that, the vote was rigged and things like that. Obviously, they're trying to sow chaos and discord. There's no indication that was the case. But it was incompetent. And if you're trying to make the case that you should be in charge and administering the federal government, you probably want to put on a display that's a little bit more functional than what we saw on Monday.
Well, your colleague David French wrote about this. Certain bare level of competence is something that we expect of a commander-in-chief or potential commander-in-chief, and that's not always hitting it. And I think that's a good transition to talk about. Tell me about the Dispatch. Tell me about your colleagues. What is this new media empire that you're a part of?
That's I appreciate you calling us an empire. Maybe we'll get there one day. Our metaphor of choice is a pirate skiff at the moment, but it's been going great. We soft launched at the beginning of October with a handful of newsletters and a few podcast offerings, and then our full launch was earlier this month, and we now have a full website. We're up to daily publishing newsletters.
And that website is thedispatch.com, correct?
Thedispatch.com.
Thedispatch.com.
I don't know how we got that URL, but it was available, and so it's been a blast. Where it's a small group. We're working a lot and kind of trying to do our best to cover what we think is important, because that's with a smaller staff. We don't have the luxury to have reporters everywhere covering every story, and so part of our value add, we think, is telling our readers what we think is important and what the biggest stories are, not necessarily the fluff and the daily back and forths that aren't going to mean anything in the longer term.
So both in general, we've seen a proliferation of news outlets, media outlets over the past decade or so, and specifically on the right, you've seen a lot of the Bulwark, et cetera. Tell me what makes you guys different and special and better, and why going to thedispatch.com is going to make me a smarter, more well-rounded person.
Well, there's a lot of great reporting being done across the spectrum and on the right. It's the Bulwark is great. The Examiner is doing a lot of good work. The Free Beacon. What we are trying to bring to our readers is a very focused approach on picking out the things that we think matter and kind of tossing the rest of it aside and not cluttering everybody. I think there's a deluge of information on Twitter, on the scrolling news feeds that you can never get to the bottom of. We want to present our readers kind of a manageable flow of information, and we want to do that in a fact-based way, and we want to be doing actual on the ground reporting. There's a lot of there's no shortage of hot takes that you can find on the internet, and what we want to do is kind of bring informed analysis and reporting from talking to people and making sure that we are shooting straight. And so that's kind of what we think our value add is. We're kind of a digital first medium. We're not burdened by some of the
legacy costs and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I want to give you an opportunity to suck up to your bosses here. You've got some of the biggest and best names in conservative reporting and punditry involved in this project. Can you talk a little bit about some of your partners, some of the folks who are generating this content?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got our founders, Steve Hayes, Jonah Goldberg, and Toby Stock. And so Steve is coming from the Weekly Standard, has incredible sources and relationships across DC, and has been incredibly helpful in kind of helping me get started because I had no experience in reporting as of 4 months ago. And then, people have been reading Jonah for decades since he started the National Review Online back in the late 90s, early aughts.
Late 90s. It was late 90s.
Yeah. And, that's something that you cannot get anywhere else on the internet. And the same with David French, who we brought over from National Review, is covering kind of some of the conservative, more cultural side issues and legal issues that he has a special Sunday column that he puts out every week focused on the intersection of faith and politics and religion in kind of everyday life. And that's not something that you see being done in a kind of a very thoughtful way anywhere else. And so it's, we think that we bring to bear kind of a unique selection of opportunity, and we're hoping to grow. And we just added a new foreign policy focused newsletter from Thomas Jocelyn that's going to come out weekly. We want to kind of find the best and smartest people on a host of different issues and bring them to our readers' inbox all in one place.
All right. Well, that's enough of the suck-uppery. Let's put the focus on you. Let's put the spotlight on you. You were, until relatively recently, first an intern and then an associate here at Hamilton Play Strategies. What's different about your new role? How do the skills that you learned here at Hamilton Place jibe with the current role? And what's been the biggest surprise and the biggest disappointment, perhaps?
I miss this place every single day. This is sucking up to my old bosses as opposed to my new ones.
We appreciate it.
That's and my old colleagues. HPS taught me a ton of things that are useful in the new job. Most importantly, I think, would be working hard. It's it's a lot of work, especially as a relatively small company that have to wear a lot of different hats. And that's, I think, the other, we're working on a host of different projects every single day at HPS, and you have to be focused on tech policy in 1 minute and then immediately switch to tax or to cybersecurity, whatever it may be. Because we're so small here at the Dispatch, you have to wear a lot of different hats. And one day I'm writing about North Korea, and the next I'm writing about the State of the Union. I'm also helping with some of the social media amplification and thinking about some of the business side of things. And so it's an opportunity to kind of stretch myself in a lot of different ways. And that, I think, comes from kind of working on a variety of different issues here at HPS.
That's fair. So what's your favorite part of the new job?
I think my favorite part of the new job is I get to spend the bulk of my day doing what I spent my free time doing before. I'd get off of work and go and scroll through Twitter for way too long and catch up on all I'm a news junkie, and so now that has become the full-time job, and it is my job to lurk on Twitter and make sure that it's can explain it away a little bit easier that way.
Yeah, it's a lot of the joy of working in politics or journalism in Washington is that the things that other people do as a hobby, following these issues, keeping up to speed, reading this stuff, it's actually your job. It's what you get paid for, and that's a pretty cool feeling in a lot of ways. It's good. So any closing thoughts? Anything I've forgotten to ask? Anything I should have asked? Any random shout-outs or promotions that we should get in here?
Well, I think we should wish you a happy birthday, and that first and foremost, that's what I can think of off the top of my head.
All right, well, fair enough. With that, we'll wrap up. If you want to find out more about what we do at Hamilton Play Strategies, please feel free to visit our website at hamiltonplaystrategies.com. Please follow us on Twitter at HPS Insight. Thank you to Declan for joining me today. You can find him on Twitter at Declan P. Garvey. I'm Michael Steele. I'm on Twitter at Michael Steele. That's Steel, no E on the end, like the metal. Thank you for listening to HPS Insights, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Insights podcast, produced by Hamilton Place Strategies. For the latest updates, follow us on Twitter at HPS Insight and visit us on the web at hamiltonplacestrategies.com.